Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome back after lunch. I hope everybody had a good lunch and is ready to continue with our session. So as Mo said in the previous section, we looked at ABC PIMP, specifically the M&A section. Terence Kaswa, the finance lead on the PYEI program, will now look at, based on the specific examples, key facets of the finance section of the PIMP. Terence, over to you.
Thanks, Naseem. Just share that. I hope you guys can see my screen. Just drop a note in the chat if you can. Right. Let's move this here so we can see. Great. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your break. I'll be taking you guys through the finance aspects of completing the ABC PIMP. What I will start with is maybe some prerequisites from your end to be able to successfully complete an ABC PIMP from a finance point of view without too many headaches. So what we are interested in, as my colleague highlighted already, is what activities you're going to do and how much it's going to cost and when all these things are going to happen. And that is what the ABC PIMP really tries to go into. Now, from a finance point of view, the question of what is it going to cost for us is a function of other documents that you guys prepare before we get to the PIMP. What I'm referring to here is things like benchmark information for the costs that you're going to put into the PIMP. So be it quotes that you might obtain or some relevant current invoices, financial reports that you're going to use to benchmark. And you will see why I'm talking about this benchmarking of costs a bit later on. For some organizations, you will see that the ABC PIMP is very standard. And we do acknowledge that your various initiatives are not going to be standard, but we need a way to be able to compare how you are costing for your project activities. So before we get here, we do acknowledge that you are likely going to have your own budgets and financial models in your own formats. So we acknowledge that. And my advice to you is, if you do have such a budget or financial model for your interventions already, do not discard it. It's actually a valuable tool that will assist you to capture the finance aspects of the ABC PIMP faster. If you try and think about activities and sub-activities and costs without some of those background documents I'm talking about, you are going to struggle to complete your ABC PIMP quickly. So just to recap, benchmarks for your costs, existing quotations or invoices that you're going to leverage, data from online, for example, costs of flights, accommodation, that sort of thing, if that's going to impact your implementation, pay scales, salary scales, that kind of benchmark information, because when we assess your ABC PIMP, we are going to be asking ourselves, are these costs reasonable? So you do yourselves and ourselves a service by making sure that you have that benchmark information, and you then provide that benchmark information as part of your uploads to support the cost that you're going to make for your project. Now, I will touch on the consortiums as well. I know that you had a bit of guidance from some of the guys earlier, and how you guys would navigate completing this ABC PIMP, given some of those complexities. So broadly, what you will see, the tabs that affect the financing or the costing of your project is tab number 2 over here, which is what you went through with Mo earlier, which I will go into, which is your activity output outcome cost tab. This deals with all your cash outflows. And then tab number 3 deals with all your cash inflows. And then funding allocation really is an extension of tab number 2 and 3. And there we are just looking at which funding source is paying for which cost items. It becomes
I'm going to ask now. Thank you,
Sorry.
man. Appreciate it. Right.
Colleagues, someone there is just unmuted. Okay, so I was saying that the funding allocation really looks at who's going to pay for what cost item, and it becomes important for projects that have, in addition to the grant that we are going to award, that is going to contribute match funding as well. And though I doubt it, if a program has some sort of secondary project income, it will be important to also know what that specific income is going to pay for. So it's part of the assessment. There's also an additional tab here, which you guys will see. It might not be in your version, but if you check online at the latest version now, it should be there. This is an NYDA costing tab, which is basically, I think through the briefing sessions we've been talking about, there are certain costs such as T-shirts and devices that NYDA is going to procure centrally. So just this tab pretty much just highlights or affords you a platform to cost those items separately, so that we are able to reference and understand the rationale behind how you're costing for devices, for, I think it's devices, marketing, and the T-shirts. So we need to see that to understand how that relates to your specific initiative. And then finally, the score budget tabs, budget tab, which brings together on the top section, is basically a snapshot of the financing plan, tab number 3, which is all your inflows. And then the bottom section, the expenditure side, is a snapshot of tab number 2. So really 2 and 3 are your primary tabs for your inflows and outflows. Score budget brings that whole picture together. There's nothing for you to worry about here as it auto populates. Then tab number 4 and 5 are supplementary tabs, but they help paint a better picture from a finance point of view. So what I'm going to do is, in the interest of time, I will pick on a few line items in the example case that we touched on, and then I will just help you to kind of think about how you go about completing the specific ABC PIMP. Now, Mo highlighted earlier this. Let's just use this first example. I think the principle is that your activities or your costs follow your activities. So if you are doing the ABC PIMP, you need to iron out your activities first. When you are happy with your activities and their timing and their sequencing, only then should you tackle the costing side of things of those activities. But as I mentioned earlier, a prerequisite for organizations that might already have a financial model, what I'm saying to you is, if you already have your own financial model and budget, just park transposing some of those numbers into the PIMP until the team working on the activities and sub-activities and so on are happy. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of iterations where you're moving things around to kind of marry those costs to the activities. So that's something to remember. And then one important thing as well around the costing, colleagues, is that please ensure your budgets or costs are VAT inclusive. I'll repeat that. Please ensure that your budgets are done VAT inclusive. All right. So taking this first example that Mo highlighted, where we are recruiting, and I hope the screen is big enough and you guys can read it. I'll just enlarge it a bit. Okay, we're talking about recruitment of young people. If I'm in finance and then I'm reading this, I will also start from the left side of the activities before I even look at the costs. So I understand that this project, okay, is going to do some advertising. I hear that they will do some roadshows. So already in my mind, as a finance person, and as you kind of compile this PIMP from a finance point of view, once your activities are locked down, you should be already saying, okay, I would expect that I'm going to see some sort of advertising costs on the right-hand side. I see community roadshows there, so I expect that I might see some transport-related costs to align to these activities. So the first checks that we do is, firstly, okay, if I go there, if I don't see those costs, that's the first issue I'm going to raise as a query to say, wait a minute, you guys are talking about advertising and so on, but where's the costing for that? So you see in this example, what we've done is under the description, you capture the cost. What are you looking to pay for advertising costs as highlighted? And you see, because of I'm able to move between the left-hand side of the ABC PIMP and my activities and my costs. Then you classify it appropriately. You see, if you scroll down here, there are 4 headline items: management costs, transfers and subsidies, compensation, goods and services, and capital. So you transfer those, you classify that level appropriately. And what you find is within these main categories, there are subcategories. So if you go here, in this case, under goods and services, you will see that there's actually conferencing, systems, consultants, training, there's bank charges, there's stationery, and so on. So you classify it accordingly, and you'll see why when we move into that score budget. So once you've classified, then you say, okay, here you show me what the total cost is going to be to advertise. So you see here, someone has done a calculation of that. Next tab, you tell me, for your projects, I doubt there will be any inflationary. Normally, where projects are implementing more than a year, you might find there might be some escalation of their costs. Because they are implementing over a long period. I doubt that we'll see month-on-month inflation. Otherwise, I'll be very worried about where the country is going. And then in this tab, you just tell me a little bit more about how you've come to that cost. So here they're saying, okay, we're going to incur 6,000 to place an advert in local newspapers. What I would add here is something like, my next question is why 6,000? You might then say cost is based on quote attached in the uploads. Okay, so now I know, okay, there's a quote that relates to advertising. So this is where that first point I raised about benchmarking comes in. So somewhere in your uploads on the GMS system there, I'm going to expect to see some benchmarking documentation to support your costs. So I will then open that quote, okay, sounds reasonable. So this first segment, you've aligned, you had advertising of the project in community newspapers, you've tagged that with an advertising cost, you have classified it accordingly, you have costed it on a total basis, you have told me what that basis is of the cost, so I'm able to follow your logic. And then the next part is now you're telling me, when does this cost happen? So what we'll do is, you see in this example, they've put month 1 there, which is for the whole entire amount. Okay, which sounds reasonable, but how do I know? I'll go back on the left-hand side and I'll say, okay, these guys in their activities, they talked about placing ads in the newspaper. So I can see they are looking to do it in month 1. So all things being equal, I would expect to see the cost in month 1, assuming they are, there's that relationship. Sometimes you might be paying for those costs 60 days later, in which case your cost might be sitting maybe in month 2. Yeah. So one of the things you might add is that payment, for example, will be based on 60 days, so that I'm able to marry the activity which was timed in month 1 and the cost which has been put in month 2. So that's an example of the flow from the left-hand side, and you can see the dependency, colleagues, from the left-hand side going to the right-hand side in terms of what it costs. So if you populate this tab with all your cash outflows, and I keep referring to cash outflows because it's a cash basis, colleagues, not accruals. So what I'm seeing, if you're saying 72 there, I'm expecting money to leave the bank in month 1. So just a reminder, colleagues, this is cash based. And if we keep going to the end, you will see that there's this auto calculation here. So what this does is it calculates how much you've projected, which is the 72, versus how much you had captured there as the total cost. So you see it also then does a difference here. So a good check is column AV to make sure that everything that you've costed equals the sum of everything that you've projected from a timing perspective. So that's an example, colleagues, of how one would marry the activity and also marry that activity with the cost. So there might be questions here but Terence, there are some general costs, like, for example, site manager oversight on all these activities. So how do we split that pie? So where you've got those kind of oversight, salary related costs, and it kind of cuts across multiple activities or sub activities. So one approach would be to either place that single cost within the most appropriate main activity and just highlight in your assumptions that this is a cross-cutting cost. The other element that some initiatives do is they will split that cost and allocate portions of it to the different sub-activities so someone can follow. But usually what happens when they do that approach, they might add a tab here, and you are, guys, free to add a new sheet right here, and they might call it, okay, I'm going to call my tab here general salary activity allocations, right? So there they would capture all those cross-cutting salary costs, and then they would show, for example, how they've apportioned across the activities. So that's an example of how you might deal with those kinds of costs. So a good example here, which I captured deliberately, which I just wanted to flag in terms of alignment between timing of activities and costs, is this one here, the second one, which is about roadshows. You can see here that the roadshows are going to happen in month 1. But if one goes through the costs related to the roadshow, which is the flight accommodation costs, you see here that they've been projected to happen in month 3, 4, and 5. So this would be a query in terms of it would be misaligned. So we would raise that. I would expect that the 52,000 would be in month 1 here. aligned to the specific timing of when those roadshows are happening. Okay, so broadly, colleagues, those are the kind of cash capturing process of the cash outflows. And in terms of sequencing, what I would advise you guys to do is to start with your cash outflows. And it will make sense later on when I look at the financing plan, why you should start with the cash outflows. It's easier to plug in how much you're going to have to draw down to pay for those costs than to keep iterating between what you think you're going to ask for and then your cost and so on. So if you are going to sequence the completion of the finance aspect, start with the activity output outcome cost tab first, so that you capture all your outflows. Once you're happy, I'm going to move to the score budget here so that I touch on this aspect first. So you see those classifications. If I go to goods and services, I'm going to enlarge so you guys can see. So you see that those classifications will pull through here. Now, sitting in here is the 72,000, but there was also other costs that were classified to advertising, which I'll touch on shortly. So this enables, so if you think about all the programs that are going to capture their PIMPs, now we as a fund manager were able to get these score budgets and say, okay, these initiatives seem to be doing more or less the same type of interventions. Let's grab their budgets. Let's see how they compare. Let's understand why, because as we mentioned, it's a competition and we want to be able to benchmark some of your costing against what your peers are costing activities. So that's why we ask for this standardization as well. You're also free, colleagues, to add your financial models, which you have in your institution, as supplementary information to the PIMP. I think what you will find is that the PIMP, in the way that it's designed, is a static representation of your project, whereas your financial models might be more iterative, where you might play around with some assumptions, and then you might see that impact. So it's a good report to also upload as supplementary information. Yeah, so that's basically how tab number 2 interacts with with the score budget from an outflow perspective, and why it's important to correctly classify your specific costs. Now, while I'm still on costs, let me come to the consortiums. Now you have 5 in this example. You have 5 implementing partners. So if you are the lead applicant, what are you going to do? So short answer is you're going to bring together the full picture of your program by incorporating the implementing partners' budgets and activities. I think Kath covered how you show those from an activity point of view. But what I would advise colleagues to do is, you will see here I've added an implementing partner budget summary. And I've deliberately left it blank because I am acknowledging that the scenarios are going to be different. There were guys, I think it was Zane, who was talking about provinces. If there's a specific reason, Zane, why you might want to show elements of each province from a costing perspective separately, you might also do that for these tabs. But if there's no need to do that, then don't do it, Zane. But if we are talking about implementing agents, what I would expect the lead to do, or what we are expecting the lead to do, is to get that information and to capture or summarize the budget information for each implementing agent in these tabs. So here you will summarize what the costs are and the workings behind those costs. And what you might do is, when you come then to tab number 2 and your costing, you might be pulling that information from those implementing agents. or implementing partner tabs, you might pull the scheduling from those. And then what you would say then is refer to IA number 5, IA 5 tab for detailed costing. So if I'm reviewing this, I'll say, okay, this is an implementing agent number 5 costs have been referred there. And then I should be able to go there and see the workings for that number that you've pulled through. Yeah, so you can add those tabs. You're free to do that, colleagues. You're also free to add any workings tabs, like what I've done here as an example. I've said, okay, let me show what I think my enrollment would be, what my stipends would be. Let me show the calculation for the reviewer. So all I'll be doing here is to say, Mr. or Mrs. Reviewer, actually, when it comes to that stipend tab, just go to the stipend tab that I've done. You'll be able to see all the workings. So that's also an option that you can exercise. So this really covers, colleagues, the outflow side of things. I hope the consortiums or those planning to apply as a consortium have a sense. I think you see the key dependency here. So if we're working with 25 November colleagues, I would almost say you guys need to have your numbers from the implementing agents probably sometime next week. I hope you already have them, but by sometime next week. And for the implementing agents who are in the audience, please give your budgets in a form that shows workings, in a form that shows assumptions. Please provide your leads with benchmarks for your costs, because we are going to ask those questions. So equip your leads to be able to consolidate the view. So that's just on the consortiums. The multi-province guys, as highlighted, bring everything in the PIMP, in one PIMP, no need for 2 PIMPs. However, if you have some specific reasons why Gauteng's costing needs to be and assumptions needs to be shown separately to Western Cape, you can add those tabs and reference appropriately where a reviewer can then find those specific costs related to Gauteng or Western Cape. And you might put a brief here of why you've done that in the assumption. Example, refer to Gauteng costs, which are costed based on X, Y, and Z, which is slightly different to Western Cape because of X, Y, and Z, so that someone has that context. So that covers broadly your cash outflows, and you've seen them pull through to the score budget at the bottom in the planned expenditure tab. So now that you've costed, you now know that from month 1 to month 10, as an example, this is how much funding I'm going to need. We then step into tab number 3, which is financing plan. So financing plan broadly is really where's the money going to come from? And we are saying we are going to give you those funds, right? So that's what that grant funding is for. Those that are contributing match funding, let us know. We'll then avail for you. There's a section on match funding here. It's currently hidden. Let's see if I can just unhide this so you see. So here you capture your match funding, your types of match funding. This is what I'm going to get, etc, etc. And then you capture when you're going to draw down those funds. Now, a good feature that we've got here, colleagues, is this deficit line. So what this is doing is saying, in month 2, right, you've costed for month 2, but the total cumulative position as at month 2 is a deficit. You need to increase the amount of money you're going to draw down. So here in our example, we had 25 million grant funding. So what you would do is say, okay, all right, so I've got a problem there in month 2. let me reduce month 5. Let's see. Let's try and let's pump 3 million here. Let's ask the fund manager for 3 million. No, not happening. Okay. Let's ask for 5. Okay. So let me reduce that. That's now 3 million. Okay. Okay, here let me make it 4. Okay. So I've added 2 there. So what's happening? I've got an extra million I need to reduce. Okay. So what this is now telling you is that your drawdowns, and some of your drawdowns are able to finance the cost that you captured earlier. So you're fine. So you've captured your grant on this side. It just shows you it's a quarterly view. If you want to know in each quarter what you're asking for, this is the monthly view. And then one thing I wanted to highlight, you would have seen when we were showing advertising there, that there was something, there was additional costs. Now, there's a section here for in-kind contributions. These are non-cash based contributions. Now, in our example, we're saying here, supposing Kaiser Chiefs in the goodness of their heart have said, we like this program, we're going to donate to this program some kits for the children. So what you would do is you would come here and say, okay, we're going to get some kits. You would capture that. Tell me what is being contributed. Tell me the basis or the valuation of the contribution. So here they're going to contribute 600 Rand worth of kits to 72,000 learners that those youth coaches are going to be interacting with. So you then value those specific the specific contribution. Now, because it's an in-kind contribution, you acknowledge that if we do not capture it in the expenses at the bottom, it's going to artificially increase the income side, and it will seem like it will then not balance. So what we do is, when we've captured the value of our in-kind contribution in the inflows, we need to marry that entry in the output side of things or the cost side of things, so that we have a nil effect on our score budget. So you will see, if I go back to tab number 2, what I've done here, I've said, okay, I've just planted that here. I've said donation of soccer kits by Kaiser Chiefs. I've classified that as part of their promotional costs. I've valued it in the same way, and you see I've plugged that there. So when we go to the score, which brings everything together, you will see at the top here are all your cash inflows. And there it is. There's the in-kind from Kaiser Chiefs. And you see, if I go to advertising at the bottom, there's the corresponding entry. So I know that my budget has a nil effect, but I've been able to show that I'm also getting some in-kind contribution as part of my program. So going back to financing plan. So this is where you capture your match funding. If you're going to contribute, you capture the grant you're going to draw down. You capture any in-kind. And if there are any secondary inflows, interest or placement fees, if any, you would capture them here. And then they would pull at the top section of the score budget. So that's a financing plan, which is your cash inflows. I'm looking at the chat. Okay, Mbali, I'm glad. So I'll move to funding allocation quickly. This is a supplementary tab, which is basically telling me that, listen, this is our sources of funds, as you can see, it's pulling through from the financing plan. It's pulling through high-level totals of the grant, the 25 million, and the in-kind contribution from Kaizer Chiefs. And the budget is pulling through from the score tab. So this is what that funding is going to pay for. And this side is where, let me just zoom that a bit larger so guys can see. So now it's saying, of that budget, who's paying for what? So that's what this exercise is about. So you see in this example that you're saying, okay, we want the grant funding to pay for 72,000 worth of advertising, 52,000 worth of transport, and stipend costs of 23 million. That's what we want. And then that in-kind contribution here from Kaizer Chiefs is part of our promotional budget for this project. So that helps us understand that, okay, all right, so they want us to pay for these cost items. They are going to pay for these cost items as well. So that's really funding application in a nutshell. And you will see there are also some error checks on this side to make sure that you balance out the total budget to the allocation by where the funding is coming from. So just keep an eye on that error check there. And then at the bottom is another one, which also compares your totals as per the financing plan. You see that it's 43 million that you've allocated. So that's fine. We're at 43. Now you see here, we've got a difference. Now you'll recall from our case that we asked for 25 million, but here you've kind of got 1.3 million left. So actually the grant that you're going to use is about 23.6. So I would say to you, as we are assessing, would say, no, look, we've looked at your budget. You've told us the budget. The number you need is not 25 million. It's actually 23.6 million as an example. So that's also what this helps us with in terms of your budgeting and costing. So that's funding allocation tab, colleagues. Then I think if we go into this NYDA costing, again, you might have downloaded maybe in the morning, so you can't see this tab. If you go back, you will see the updated version, and it's this tab is really about the costs that are going to be directly procured by NYDA. And
Stephen, how are you?
Sorry, there's someone who's just unmuted. Please mute your mics, colleagues. You will see that it's an open tab, and that's deliberate. We are saying you guys tell us insofar as it relates to these specific cost items that would be funded by the NYDA. This tab shows us some of your cost assumptions, show us the basis of the costing, show us the workings, and also show us some of the timelines on when you're going to incur these costs. So what this helps us to do is to understand the costing, these costs from your perspective, and it also provides us with a centralized place where we can identify those costs and also communicate directly with the NYDA. Because what happens is once you've done your costing and we've reviewed it, it will obviously provide you with any feedback related to these costs. And then NYDA will procure, especially like the devices and the uniforms, and then we will communicate together with them when you guys should be able to either collect or when we'll just ship out those parcels to you. But that will be communicated at a later point to you guys. So basically, in summary, colleagues, what I'm saying here is you will see in the term sheet we highlighted to cost of devices, we highlighted marketing and comms, and we highlighted participant uniforms. And I think in the briefing session, people were asking, so where do I show that? So show us here in this tab. So we keep things separate from the main budget that we are going to fund through disbursements to your organizations. And just to highlight as well, on those specific costs, that what we have done, let me just see here, we have some initial prescriptions on the limits to the costs, and what we are looking at in that instance is we are looking to provide, I hope you can see that, put that here. So what we're saying is that every organization has a budget of for one entry-level laptop. We're looking at a cost of about 5.3 for that. We've also put a budget of 1.1 for licenses related to that laptop. We've put a limit as well, a budget of 3.5 for a smart device. And we're looking to give about 58 to 60 devices per NPO as part of the allocation. So just to recap, we are saying one entry-level laptop, which together with the software licenses, it comes to 6.4 max. And then we're saying smart devices that you may require for tracking beneficiary activities and so on. We are saying that we've got a budget of limited to 3.5 per smart device, and we're saying we will be providing between 58 to 60 devices per successful organization. So just bear those limits in mind as you're costing. At this stage, we want to understand your specific needs. So if you're going to require beyond that, our expectation at this point is we would need to assess that, but you would need to fund that with additional match funding. We are constrained by our budget and those limits, but rather cost it in this sheet, and then we can have more discussion based on your specific circumstances. And then just to communicate as well that we are working on a solution, a payment solution to your participants as well. But what we understand is some organizations already have those in place. So again, let's communicate at this stage, and you can reflect those specific costs as well in detail, and then we can engage on a case by case on those matters. But just to recap again, finally, colleagues, the laptop and licenses are limited to 6.4, which is one per organization. The smart devices are limited to 3.5 per device, and we're looking to give 58 to 60 such devices to those organizations that will contract. These will be procured centrally by the NYDA, and we will be in a position to communicate the logistics around collection or delivery to you guys at a later stage. So let me just see here. Is there a maximum amount that can be applied for? Jackie, to my knowledge and my assessment of the term sheet, no. I think how you cost within the limits that were outlined in the term sheet. As highlighted, if your program has a scale that exceeds the available budget, our anticipation is you will be able to finance that increased scale with your own matching contribution. Right, let's see, Calvin. I'm not sure if 8% of introduction will meet the closing deadline. All right, your comment is noted, Calvin. What I will say, I won't speak so much about reviewing the closing date, is that the reason we are walking this path with you is to try and help as much as we can. We understand that it's a steep learning curve. The beauty of technology is that people can reference these discussions. We are available to add more insight as you work with it. From experience, when one is now busy with the PIMP, that's when all the questions start flowing. So my advice to you is get your hands dirty early, because your questions are going to start coming at that point. And hopefully you can refer to this briefing to help you, but we're also available as well for your project or program specific issues. Will the Jobs Fund be providing some templates of software packages to allow upscaling of project organization in terms of making of payments and M&E tracking systems? Hi, Joe. So what I highlighted is we are currently looking at a solution to kind of assist that aspect of the payment and tracking aspect. But at this point, I think you would have seen in the communication is that that's still a work in progress. And given our timelines, we'll be communicating that further if we're able to get that online in the times. Will a consortium in different demographics be expected to use one laptop? So Mosima, the laptop is really just what we're saying is that's what the budget can allow, but organizations are obviously open to increase that number, depending on leveraging either additional match funding first, but failing which you would have to look at that 15% site implementation cost allocation if you want to add on more. The terms of reference say maximum budget is 15 million. Let me check, maybe Fidelis, do you want to take that one? That does not sound 100% correct to me.
Is that the 15 million?
Yes.
I'm not aware of where that reference is coming from. Jackie, maybe you can be more specific about where that 15 million is stipulated, and then we can respond.
Okay, Jackie, while we wait, all right, colleagues, are there other comments before I close this? As I highlighted, we are here to assist you. Page 6, all right, Jackie, thanks for that. What would you?
I think that's in reference to the other call for proposals, the Innovation Fund, not the National Youth Service.
I see.
Jackie, you're referring to a different terms of reference. On this training session, we're looking at the National Youth Service Program, not the Innovation Fund. Thanks.
Yeah, Jackie, that session is tomorrow, so I hope to see you there. Nazim will be able to kind of shed more light for that specific program. What is the funding bracket for this project, sir? Now, Ushe, are you referring to the minimum and maximum amounts you guys can apply for? All right. So, Ushe, I think you will see if you reference the term sheet, there were no minimum and maximum number of or amounts you could apply for. However, the guiding issue was the 3,000 participants that an organization is expected at a minimum to be able to support. So you almost start from that 3,000, then you start to ask yourself, what are the activities and what are the costs to get those 3,000 participants through our program? Then present that in your submission. I hope you answered. Great, great, great. All right, colleagues, let me recap some prerequisites again for those that might have joined late. Benchmarking of your costs. These are either quotations, existing invoices you're going to use, existing financial reports. You know what it costs based on your organization experience. Have those, upload those with your ABC PIMP in order to enable us to answer the question of, are these costs reasonable? So help us to answer that question. Number two, if you've got a financial model that's interactive, don't throw it in the dustbin, leverage it, and use the numbers you're formulating in that model and transpose those numbers into the ABC PIMP. Number three, please wait for the activities and sub-activities to be done, and then attach your costs to those sub-activities. What is the minimum number of youth an institution can train? Fidelis, do you want to take that one?
So training has to be linked to the activities that the young people have to participate in. So we don't prescribe minimums, but it's obviously linked to the number of young people you're engaging and the extent to which they will require that kind of training in order to deliver on the activities to standard. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Fidelis. See, all right. Provide benchmarks. So I was talking about financial models. Use them to complete your ABC PIMP if you have. And right, wait for the completion of the activities. Attaching costs. That saves you a lot of time, colleagues. And ask questions, colleagues. Reference this presentation, and we are there. I know you're going to have plenty of them once you start doing the ABC PIMP. Are we allowed to do more than one intervention or project, e.g. 50% food? And so, Dumisani, yes, you are allowed. You can apply for as 2 separate programs, but you know what that means, Dumisani? It means 2 PIMPs. So I hope you're ready for that. But short answer is yes. And I think there are some projects, single projects, which has multiple programs. I think I heard that in the earlier briefing from in the earlier discussion. So that project may have sub-programs in it, in which case you're just applying as one project. So I hope you answered that to me. All right, colleagues, I think with 5 minutes to spare, that is me. I know things are going to come up. Your minds are maybe percolating at the moment, but keep dropping them in the chat. I'm still around as Eldon presents. We'll respond as we can as more things come to light. And with that, I think I will hand over my colleague Eldon for the graveyard shift. Thanks, colleagues.
Thank you, Terence. Just another reminder, Terence, in terms of his final points, just a reminder that the ABC PIMP is based on a cash basis of accounting, and also that all costs must include VAT where applicable. Thank you. So Eldon, head of our GMS team, will now be taking us through the application form itself and navigating the GMS as such. To be able to do that, please continue to post your questions in the chat. Thank you. Eldon?
Cool. Thank you, Nazim. Are you able to see my screen?
I am Alden.
Okay.
Let's stop there, Alden.
Okay, let me just try and increase my mic. Is that a bit better?
It is,
Nazim?
thank you, Alden.
Okay, thank you. All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the graveyard shift, as students have put it. During this segment of the training, my colleague Monray will be assisting me with some of the various sections of the application form. So what I'm going to start off with is just in terms of how do we access it. I did show it a little bit earlier in the presentation, but if you haven't done so already, you would access the online portal and essentially the online application form by accessing the JobsFund's website. The JobsFund's website is www.jobsfund.org.za. And once you've landed on the homepage of the JobsFund's website, you are then able to click into the area that specifically speaks to National Youth Service, which will then redirect you to the applicable landing page. Again, I just want to remind colleagues or participants as part of the score that if you haven't done so already, please ensure that you download the term sheet, as well as, very importantly, the online application form user guide. This will be a step-by-step instruction of what I'm going to take you through now, but it's very good to use as a reference when proceeding with the application form. We also have the frequently asked user guide that's been updated based on queries that have coming through our help desk, as well as from our briefing sessions last week. And then we have the link that has apply here that you would then click on it. Once you've clicked onto the link for via the JobsFund website, we would then redirect you to our online portal. At this stage here, there are a few steps that you would need to follow. First of all, if you need to register on our online portal by clicking the hyperlink that says register now. And this allows you to put impertinent details of such as your name and surname, an email address, and by completing this process, you would then be able to log into the application form. Also, something that's a little bit daunting, but we made sure that it's very well displayed, is the actual timeline or the deadline submission. We have a counter that's running down, and as you can see, we have 15 days and 1 hour to actually complete your application form and have it submitted through to us. Once you've received your username and password from the system, you would then be able to log in. Very important is to ensure that everyone that's going to be assisting with the application process has their own login details. The system does have an audit trail that we record the sessions that are utilized when accessing the system. So we please encourage everyone to do so. I will take you through the process of showing you how you can add additional users to your project profile to assist you with completing your online application form. Another important feature here is that when you register on the online portal, you would have received a temporary password. All users are then encouraged to go and change their password once they've logged in successfully to the system. All right, moving along. When you enter into the landing page, you will note that there is a feature in the middle of the screen that says create new application. This will allow you to create a new application where you would complete a couple of pre-registration details, such as the name of your intervention or project, where your head office is going to be based, what type of organization are you, before you enter into the actual application process. I have created a project already. And once you have registered onto the system and you've done that pre-registration step, this is a similar view that you would see with your project number, which would be that unique reference number that would have been emailed through to you. And the icon that looks like a magnifying glass, you would simply click on that and it will take you back to your application form. I'm going to hand over to Mondre to just run through the first tab that you would see on our application form, which is the eligibility criteria tab. Mondre?
Thank you, Alden. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to take you through each one of the tabs as the presentation would move forward. The first tab on the application form is the eligibility tab. Here we're asking you 10 questions to ascertain your eligibility to actually participate in the NYS program. At the bottom of the eligibility tab, it is indicated that applications must meet the above eligibility criteria in order to proceed to the next section. This means that if you answer no to any of the 10 questions posed, you will not be eligible and you would not be able to complete the application form. In this event, you will receive an auto-generated email from the Jobs Fund to indicate that you are ineligible. However, if you answer yes to all these questions, it means you are eligible and you can now proceed to complete the application form. Thank you, Alden.
Thanks, Mondre. And like Mondre has indicated, so initially you would only see the eligibility tab, and thereafter you will see the main headings, which I'm highlighting on the screen here, will then be available for you to then edit. Mondre, we can then go into the institutional information tab details.
Thank you. So under the second tab, the institutional information tab. Now this tab has been broken down into a number of parts. The first part is contact details of the applicant and partners to give us an idea in terms of where you are based, how we can communicate with you. It's also broken down into track record, budgetary requirements, and very importantly, uploads relating to the institutional information provided. I'm going to move to section 1.4 and provide Alden the opportunity to highlight some key system features for you.
So with section 1.4, what you'll note is that when you register your application via the previous screen that I demonstrated, is that your details will essentially become the main contact person for the intervention. However, we do note that there might be a different main contact, and I'll take you through the method of adding new colleagues onto the application form that will allow them to gain access. It will give them login details that will be emailed through to those individuals and would then obviously be able to assist with accessing the online application form. So in section 1.4, the main contact would complete the pertinent details, the designation, also a few contact details. But what's also important is this portion that talks about colleagues and contact persons to have access to the online application form. There's an add colleague button where you would simply just type in your colleague's email address. Because I have got someone that a profile that's already set up, what would happen is you would note that there are some pertinent details that would need to be captured for your main colleague, for the colleague that you're about to add, such as the title, first name, surname, the designation, and also important, what role that individual would be playing. Is it project management, is it finance, and so forth. Once you've added this individual onto the application form by clicking the Add Colleague button, once again, this person will then be sent an email via our system that will allow them to gain access to the application form. So in this case here, we were talking about the amount of time that we have left up until, you know, the submission date of the application. This gives you the ability to add additional users onto your project profile that will assist you with completing some of the information. We also have a feature that's available for us that if you are not the main contact, the person that you add here, you'll have the ability by clicking on the nominate lead main contacts button that will allow you to actually nominate a new main contact. And I think for me, Mondre, that is the key point around this particular section. If you've downloaded the user guide, this would be on page 14 of the user guide, which is the step-by-step instruction on how to actually complete this particular step. I'll now move over to the Add Partners section. So during the presentations of today, we've had a number of questions around implementing partners. So this tab, the Partners tab or Implementing Partners tab, allows you to add implementing partners to the application form. What's also important is that when you add an implementing partner to the application form, you would have to complete the applicable or corresponding information that's related to that implementing partner. There's a table feature that's displayed immediately when you access the Partners tab, where you are then able to enter in the partner's name, the type of contribution, the type of institution type, and then briefly describe the role of that partner and what role that partner would play during the proposed intervention. So you are able to then add multiple partners. One thing to note here is that if you had selected financial partner, I'll come back to that because your partner would then appear on another tab for another purpose. But I'll come back to that particular point. Mondre, maybe you can then take us through the details that would be required for each of the implementing partners that you add via this process.
Thank you, Alden. So for each of the partners, some of the information will be copied from the previous tabs that you have complicated. But for the implementing partners, again, as per the institutional tab, we are requesting you to indicate and provide us with email addresses, contact details. So in the event we have to communicate with you, we would be in a position to actually get hold of you. Thank you, Alden. Okay. Under the Uploads tab, you would see that we are using the red asterisk to provide you that these documents are actually mandatory and you have to upload these documents. Alden will also discuss with you later that there is a process where you can validate, and where any of these documents that are mandatory have not been uploaded, you would not be in a position to actually continue or submit the application. Thank you, Alden.
Thanks, Mondre. So like Mondre was indicating is that the red asterisks do indicate that this is a mandatory field. And to assist our applicants with identifying what sections on the application form are mandatory, we've built in two processes. The first is an on-screen process that every single time you click the Save button, that a message will pop up at the top of the screen indicating which are the fields that are then considered mandatory. You would then be able to go to that specific section and complete it accordingly in order to successfully pass the validation for this particular tab. The second method of validation is a process that we've built into the system that allows a validation to take place across the entire application. And this would then also give guidance to if you have multiple people or users working on the application form at the same time. This is a good tool because when you click the validate button, what will happen is a pop-up will then be displayed to show you across the entire application what is the information that is still outstanding and that needs to be completed in order for you to successfully submit your application. I think the last point before we move on to the next point, next tab, is that we do have a feature that says previous and next. And this just basically takes you to the previous or next tabs and does also enable a save feature when doing so. We're now going to be moving on to the governance tab. Mondre?
Alden, thank you. Before we move on to the governance tab, there's a question from Cleoban Gondu. And his question is, may you explain about the need? What do we upload? So Alden, if you can just go back to under the institutional tab, point 6, the lead applicant's track record. Go further up. Yeah. So I think to quickly answer that question, the question, do you have existing budget funding for work with NEED youth? So NEED is the acronym for Youth Not in Employment, Education and Training. And Cleobine, and to the rest of the participants, in terms of the eligibility criteria, NPOs must have existing funding contracts that secure at least 50% of existing business over the next year. So with that question, what do you need to upload under upload 5 would be evidence to indicate that you actually do have the budget to continue with work with NEED. Thank you. If there's any additional questions, you can just pop it in the chat and we will answer. Thank you, Alden.
Right. Thanks, Mondre. So we are now at the governance tab.
Okay. So the governance tab is broken down into 4 different sections, and these sections include the institutional arrangements for implementing the initiative, key staff, personnel, system, and then again uploads. So under the question 1, what is the planned institutional arrangement for implementing the initiative? We want to know, who are you partnering with? What is the relationship between you and the other project partners? And then we also want a detailed description of each partner's roles and responsibility. You also need to indicate to us whether you have formal MOUs or agreements in place to show that there is this understanding and agreements between the various partners to implement the initiative. Under question 2, who are the key staff members responsible for management of the initiative? We want you to provide us with the information in terms of who the key staff would be that's going to implement the project. And we want you guys to provide us with at least the project manager, the finance person, the M&E person, and also the organization responsible for oversight of the program. I'm going to hand you over to Alden to take you through how to add a staff member.
Thanks, Mondre. I think that it's pretty straightforward in terms of the functionality that's available, where you would enter details such as the first name, surname, the role of that individual, the responsibility, the organization pulls through from the organization details that you would have articulated in the institutional information tab, as well as the implementing partner tab. You would then be able to briefly explain the qualifications of that individual as well as experience. I think what's also important to note is that it is a mandatory requirement that we have at least these 3 individuals, a project manager, finance, and M&E person that would need to be added to this table in order for your validation to be successful when completing this particular section. I think that the other important point is that once you've added these individuals, at the bottom of the tab here, we do require that the CVs of those individuals needs to be uploaded onto the system. Mondre, I think we can move on to the next tab, which is the description tab.
Thank you, Alden. So under the description tab, this is where everything is going to happen. This is where we want you to tell us and explain us how you're going to implement this initiative. Here we want you to tell us more about the proposed initiative. We want to know where, which geographical areas will the initiative be implemented in, which sectors and which community service activities you will be focusing on this initiative. Then we want you to tell us what is the service that the youth will be participating in. Okay. After that, we want you to indicate to us the beneficiaries of the service, who the target beneficiaries are, other targeted participants in the program, how you will ensure that the targeted beneficiaries have the appropriate skills to perform the community service activity. And lastly, we also want you guys to give us an idea what other support will be available for the participants to ensure that the project is successfully implemented. When I'm going to take everyone through the individual service plan, I will touch more on the support for the particular service. Thank you, Alden.
Cool. I think the other important thing to note from a system point of view is that with the narrative text boxes that are available for each of the sections, that there is a maximum number of words that can be entered in. So as you begin typing, you'll note that there is a feature that will advise you on the maximum number of words or how many words are left to explain or be articulated in each of the sections. Another key question that normally pops up is, if I have prepared something in another document already, am I able to then transpose that information over into the narrative text boxes? The simple answer is yes, you are able to copy and paste information from a Word document, a PDF document, into these various sections. But I think I just want to caution the participants to ensure that you please read through each of the applicable help text that's been provided for each of the questions, because we want you to then clearly articulate, and respond to those particular areas within the help text directly. I think that it just makes it a little bit easier from an appraisal point of view that we are able to then elicit that information as quickly as possible in a clear manner. Again, the other point is that if there are more information that you do want to present through to us, you are able to then refer to another document that you are then able to upload onto the system. We are going to be moving on to the next tab, which is the budget tab. Monroe.
Thank you, Alden. So Terence provided a lot of detail in terms of how to complete the ABC PIMP Lite from a finance point of view. So I'm just going to summarize the funding and budget tab. And I think it will also be good as it can be used as a refresher to what Terence has mentioned earlier. So when it comes to the funding and budget tab, here we want to get a summary in terms of, a description of the resources, where you're going to get funding from, besides the grant from the jobs fund, what the in-kind contribution would be, how many staff you're going to use, salaries and wages, etc. From a match funding point of view, as you all are aware, that match funding is not a requirement for this call for proposal, but should applicants have access to match funding partners, it will definitely make them more competitive. From a system point of view, the information you need to provide us the total amount requested, total cash contribution by the applicant, if any, total cash contribution from other sources, and total in-kind contributions, and also total other income. Terence has spoken about the total other income in his presentation. So you will see that you won't be able to complete this if you haven't done and completed the finance section on the ABC PIMP. Okay. Now, I'm going to hand over to Alden to take you through the source of funding from a systems point of view.
Thanks, Andre. Again, I think that this particular section is quite self-explanatory. It's a table feature that you would then be able to add the partners that relate to those that are going to be contributing towards match funding, a description of what their source of funds or resources would be used for, as well as the amount. And I think, again, as Andre indicated, this would then tally back up to the amounts that you would then be working through in the ABC PIMP. I think the other point that I was trying to make around the implementing partners is that if through the partners tab you had indicated that this partner is providing a financial contribution in the budget tab, it would be retrieved automatically, and you would simply just be adding in an amount to adding to this table. I think that is the only other key sort of area around explanation, Andre.
Okay. Thanks, Alden. So if I can just briefly touch on the match funding controls that we have on this tab. As already mentioned, match funding is not the requirement. However, where relevant, we would like you to indicate the status of the match funding. If you're going to get match funding from a private company, we want to at least get an indication in terms of, you know, how far you are with that process and when that match funding agreement is expected to be finalized. Also, where it's not applicable to you, please indicate not applicable in the control, otherwise we won't be able to continue with the application. And then also still relating to match funding, also indicate to us whether there are any other outstanding issues and conditions relating to approval of your match funding. Then I want to go into the budget line items. Again, Terence has gone through this, but here, important, we have highlighted some of the main project costs. And again, for everyone to remember that it's important that we take note of the caps or ceilings relating to some of the cost items reflected here. Under uploads, the ABC PIMP. Under the budget tab, this is where you have to upload the completed ABC PIMP. Alden has indicated before where you can access the ABC PIMP document on the online portal. Thank you, Alden.
Right. Just maybe just to remind the colleagues or the participants that's on the training session today, that on the right-hand side of each of the various menu tabs, you will find a section that says downloads. The ABC PIMP is the very first download, and there are other documents that are available for download: the due diligence checklist, the standard DAO's grant agreement. Again, we have the opportunity to download the application user guide, basically what we're taking you through, and we also have the term sheet that's available for download. We're going to move on to the next tab, which is the indicators tab, Andre.
Thank you, Alden. So again, just a refresher on what Muketi and Catherine took the participants through earlier. So for the NYS program, we have three main project indicators. And again, when completing the PIMP, after that, you'd be in a position to complete this section of the online portal application form as well, because when you do your ABC PIMP, you'll be in a position to actually make certain assumptions and in terms of how you got to the particular number. But under the main indicators, you're also going to include how you're going to collect evidence and data for the number of beneficiaries that you will be targeting and reaching on this project, and also again input the assumptions how you got to those numbers. Under the initiative specific project indicators, these are indicators that are specific to your project or initiative. And Muketi took the participants through this process earlier. Again, you're going to have, some people might have 3 project-specific indicators, other might have 10 project-specific indicators. But under the indicator tab, you're going to indicate to us the name of the indicator, the assumptions, the data collection process, and also the means of verification that you're going to submit to us as evidence. And then obviously you're going to provide us with the proposed numbers that you're going to achieve. Thank you, Alden.
Thanks, Mandre. I think importantly to note here is that the majority of this section is a mandatory requirement for you to complete. And as Mandre indicated, that if it's not applicable to your project, specifically around the project specific indicators, if you could then just add in not applicable where within the various fields. Mandre, we are now going to move on to the next tab, which is the impact tab.
Thank you, Alden. So in terms of the NYS term sheet, we have 4 impact criteria that your applications will be assessed on. And under the impact tab, we want all applicants to provide us with a bit more detail in terms of how they meet the impact criteria, so that we would be in a position to assess how your initiative actually meet the NYS principles. Just to repeat those impact criteria, the first one is alignment with the National Youth Service principles as outlined in the term sheet. Here you must provide us with an indication in terms of how the initiative actually is aligned to the NYS principles. You must be able to successfully enroll a program beneficiaries onto the National Pathway Management Platform. You need to give us a summary in terms of how that is going to be done. And then we also want to get an idea in terms of what are the attributes that the beneficiaries would have at the end of the program. Very importantly, capacity to implement. If you look at the eligibility criteria, we are requesting that applicants should have a track record of at least 3 years of implementing similar initiatives. We want to see whether the applicants have the required financial monitoring evaluation systems in place. We also want to see whether these applicants have access to other partners to engage at least 3,000 participants throughout the program. Then capacity to scale. We want to get an idea and see how the initiative is proposing to scale after the implementation period, which is 1 year for this CFP. We want to see how you would be in a position to continue engaging other partners to ensure that you'll be able to provide more beneficiaries community service opportunities. And then contribution to systemic change. Here we want to see what impact would this project here have in the identified or proposed initiatives. What impact would this initiative have on participants of this initiative? Thank you, Alden.
Thank you, Alden Monroe. Please continue to post your questions on the chat as you move along. We are now going to have a short 15-minute tea break. For yourselves to gather yourselves, gather your thoughts.
Apologies, Nazim. Sorry, I got load shedded, so my screen switched off. There's just 2 more tabs that we just want to take you through before we have that break. Apologies.
Please continue. Apologies, colleagues.
Thanks for that, Monroy. The next tab, sorry, there's just 2 more tabs to get through. The next tab that we are going to demonstrate is the risk tab. Monroy?
Thank you, Alden. So just to tie back to the track record of the applicants that we require from a risk point of view, I believe all participants on this webinar today, training session today, they have implemented the projects before, and we know that with every project, there are certain events that occur that have a negative impact on the project, whether causing a delay or whether you're not meeting your targets. So under the risk and mitigation section of the risk tab, we want you guys to think about what are the potential risks based on your experience, and also how you put this initiative together. What are the potential risks or events that would have a negative impact on the project? So we want you to identify the risk, give a description of the risk, also indicate to us in terms of what the potential impact on the project success would be, who's going to be responsible to manage that risk, and then also indicate to us how are you going to mitigate that the risk, one, does not occur, or if you cannot eliminate the risk from occurring, how are you going to mitigate that the impact of that risk would not be as severe. So we have made provision for a number of the risks that need to be identified. If I can give you a potential few examples, is that you have signed an agreement with one of the partners that's also going to provide you access to some of the youth or participants. 6 months down the project, there's some institutional issues, and now the partnership goes sour, and now you don't have 300 people that would be able to come to the project. You need to give us an indication in terms of how that risk is going to be managed. For example, another risk would be training. We know with COVID, there are legislated requirements. For example, in terms of gathering, only a specific amount of people can actually engage or get together in a room. Now, if you are going to engage at least 3,000 participants, how are you going to make sure that you meet those requirements, and how are you going to mitigate that the COVID-19 restriction is not going to have a negative impact on the project? Thank you, Alden.
Right, thanks, Monroy. I think from a system point of view, there is a drop-down here that speaks to responsibility for mitigation actions. And this information will pull the role that's been added to the table around key staff, which we saw on the governance tab. And as you can see, because I added the project manager in on the governance tab via that feature, it now tells me that the person that's going to be responsible is the project management or project manager. Similarly, we would have other options like finance, M&E, etc., depending on the options that you select at that particular stage. We are now moving on to the last tab, which is the uploads tab, Monroy.
Thank you, Alden. So I'm going to be 30 seconds on this. Then I'm going to hand over Alden to go into more detail on the uploads. So you will see under the upload tabs, we have uploads under each of the sections that we've discussed, or the tabs we've discussed before. The uploads here would be uploads that we have not requested in the previous tabs. I'm going to hand over to Alden.
Thanks, Monroy. I think that the important points to note here is that the documents that can be uploaded need to be in specific file formats. That's at the top of every single document.
Another important point is that the file size per document uploaded cannot exceed 10 megabytes. So you can have multiple files that you upload into a specific section as long as it's less than 10 megabytes in size. What would happen is that we would also be able to, or the system would then be able to generate a message should the size be exceeded. I think the other point that's worth noting is that if a upload is mandatory and for some or other reason does not apply to your intervention, you need to upload a signed letter that's dated and on your letterhead indicating why is that document not applicable to your intervention. Before I wrap up and hand over to the facilitator, there's just a couple of key, further key system elements that I just want to maybe just describe quickly. The first thing is pop-up blockers. Please ensure that your pop-up blocker is turned off for this particular site, because from time to time, what we will have is information messages that will be popped up. And if your pop-up blocker is turned on, you won't see that information message. So you are able to set that on your web browser, depending on what you're using, Google Chrome, etc. There would be a message that would be displayed to allow those pop-ups to be enabled for the site. The second thing that I do want to advise on is that at the top of every single screen, we do have a read-only application form print view. By clicking on this button will essentially generate a read-only view of the entire application form that you are then able to download in a PDF format. The next item that I want to speak to, if I can just move this out the way, is the validate and submit button, as well as the terms and conditions. So once you have completed your entire application form, very important to note is that you have to run the validation process. It's part of the procedure for submitting your application. So what the validation process will do, as highlighted previously, is that it will advise our applicants on what tabs still need to be completed in order to successfully submit your application. Once the system has determined that you have no outstanding or mandatory fields to complete, the system will then prompt you to then accept our terms and conditions for this intervention, which I then urge you to please ensure that you read through before you accept the terms and conditions. This year would contain things that would normally be articulated in that standard grant agreement that's available for download, part of the declaration, and the information that would have been disclosed in the terms sheet that's available for download. Lastly, once you have accepted your terms and conditions, the system will then automatically require you to submit your application. You would then submit your application. When you submit your application, you will receive a notification from the system indicating that you are able to, that your application has been successfully submitted to the fund manager, namely the Jobs Fund, and that you need to ensure that you complete this year before 3 o'clock on the 25th of November. It's very important, as no late applications will be accepted. Nazim, I think that pretty much sums up the remainder of my presentation. I just want to encourage participants once again to go to the Jobs Fund's website or access the application form and download the user guide, because exactly what's been articulated in this segment of the presentation will provide you with further and more clearer details on each of the system controls that's available on the system to ensure that you are able to successfully submit your application to the job site. Thank you.